Listen closely, watch them all. Stand in their shoes, they're walking tall. The skills are balanced, stories unfold. And as we watch, truth will be told. Voices of justice, sound loud and clear. Voices of justice, you'll find the best here.
Cat
Okay,
is
that's
what I'm
fine.
thinking. So you have a totally different background than you had last time.
Yes, I am actually in my office. So my little abode that I come back when I'm not on the bench. So
So I think that's really cool because then people can see,
yes, the different parts of me and where I am, right?
right, exactly. And I'm putting one out this week. I don't know if you know. Okay, we're recording. I won't talk about it. We're recording. Anyway, there's a judge that had an issue. She didn't have the issue. She didn't do the thing people accuse her of doing. She's getting threats. Okay, so first I'm going to introduce you. Let's talk about, we'll talk about all kinds of things. We can go wherever is there something? Hold on, I'm going to stop recording. Okay. I am so excited to have Judge Simpson back with us today. And Judge Simpson, you are in a completely different place than you were in last time, and I think this is so neat because we're giving everyone a little more of a peek inside your life as a judge. Can you tell us about where you are and what you do there?
Well, I am actually in my chambers right now. I don't really have a way necessarily to pan the camera, but it's actually my office where I do the majority of my work. I think the last time we interviewed or you interviewed me, I was actually sitting on my bench.
Yeah.
So I think that people don't realize that judges aren't always sitting on their bench or outside. There's actually a place that we do work and we do everything. And so my coordinator Ann is right outside my office. So this is where it all happens, I think. Sometimes.
That is so neat. So if you're gonna, because I know sometimes you'll go talk to attorneys together, or is this where you go when you bring people back?
I either bring them here. I have a conference table which holds about 6 people, but I also have located right next to me um, is our jury deliberation room. So when we don't have a jury, I'll take them in there, or I'll bring them in here to talk. Or sometimes when I have two separate parties that I'm dealing with, I'll put one of them in my chambers, one of them in the jury selection room, and then maybe shuttle back and forth between them as we're dealing with issues. So.
Very cool. Very cool. Oh my goodness. Yeah, see, I just think that's so neat. And I was really hoping to be there. We will be there at some point.
Okay,
Looking at
we're,
all these
we're looking
things.
forward to it.
And yeah, me too. Me too. So since it's been a few months since we've talked.
Yes.
What's been happening with you since then? Anything new and exciting in the world of?
Not really. I mean, we have some cases. I won't discuss the details, but we have certain cases that are coming up regarding some of the college protesters that we're working through. We have a number of different murder cases that we're dealing on, and the like. And if that wasn't enough, I'm dealing with basically a complex which the entire complex has been condemned and now trying to find housing for likely about 300 plus people. So,
Oh wow.
so it's just been kind of doing that and working, through all of those cases and trying to get the work that needs to be done and have the necessary hearings.
So as a judge, is that technically your job, or is that something that you're doing just because you want to help the people?
Oh, in terms of those cases,
Mm-hmm.
and in terms of
Of
yeah,
helping find.
that's my job. My job is to hear the cases, try to resolve some of those issues. The housing issue has become a little bit more complex only because housing here in Washtenaw County is at a premium, and so we have limited other housing. So trying to find housing for people is going to take the pooling of a lot of resources, county resources and other things to try to coordinate all of that. So
That's a
we're
lot of
just
people.
working through that whole process. So, and I should say it's 300 units. It's probably more people only because there are families involved and not just single people in their single units. So.
Wow. Yeah, I can't imagine trying to find homes for 300 people. And I'm guessing, I mean, that it would have to be affordable housing. It's if that's the kind of building. So this is
Exactly, which is really also part of the issue. We have a number of people that are on that have vouchers or some type of subsidized housing. So it's a little bit more complicated moving those individuals as opposed to people that may be paying market rent and trying to find them or moving them. But then there's the question of who's paying for the move, who's paying for the new unit. All of those things are coming in. So we had about a 4.5 hour hearing yesterday, preliminarily dealing with about 40 of the cases that I have. We expect another 40 plus cases coming through. So it's just going to be it'll be an adventure. Let me put it that
it will
way.
be an adventure. Well, and I think that's something about you too, is that you have this compassion for people. And the judges that I speak to tend to have a compassion for people. I think that's one of the reasons I reach out, because you stand out, right? And I want to make sure that people see the human side, right? Because I think a lot of times people see being a judge as a role. I don't know. It's not that it's not a human, but it's so far above and beyond what everyone else does, they just can't even imagine. And so to show this compassion coming from the bench, and we're not just sentencing people. That's not the job
No,
of a judge.
no, absolutely. And I think that the thing that, most of my colleagues that I talk to and am aware of, the one thing people have to keep in mind about judges act differently. And they're going to be their own personality, whatever that is. But I think at the core for judges, what we all realize is somebody can come to me about a dispute that is about $25. And that may mean nothing in the grand scheme of things in the world. But the cold hearted reality is maybe for that person, that's the most important thing they have at that moment. And so as a judge, you have to kind of treat it that way. Um, may not be important to me. Maybe something because of the position I'm in that just pay the $25 or do whatever. But individuals that find themselves in that position, it's sometimes about principle for them. It's sometimes about the money, but it's something that's important to that person. Very few people are before the court just for the sake of being before the court. It's not like they probably have a lot better things to do and can think of other things they'd rather do, but they're here for a reason, and it's important to take that in mind. But also, I go back to what my mother taught me, both my mother and father, but mainly my mother, and that is that you're looking at that person could be you, and you don't want someone up there not taking what may be central to you and is important, and understanding who you are when you're coming before the court. And people don't always present in a way that is consistent and how we would think people would present, but they don't mean any harm. And so you have to kind of reach out. And a lot of things that people have to say are embarrassing. They, and they can feel ashamed of themselves. But because they found themselves in a particular, predicament, doesn't mean that, you know, they're not entitled to be treated with the utmost respect. So that's
Yeah.
how I.
And I believe that most people that have the job you have believe the same way. They want the best for people.
I
You
think
know,
so.
I think the people that get mad at judges are the people that are committing crimes. They're,
Yeah,
experiencing what happens when you do that sort of thing.
yeah, and that won't. They're not going to respect our institutions anyway. So I have always had the philosophy: you can get mad at me for my decision. I made my decision. This this is the decision that I made. I will try to explain to you the best way I can. And if you want to be mad at me, you can be mad at me. But I can't do anything about that. As long as I done and made a good faith effort to make the best decision that I can, and I'm going to make that decision.
There you go. And that leads me right into another question that I had, which was I had just spoken to another judge who was dealing with some threatening behavior from people. Is that something that you've experienced, or if you would rather not talk about it, we don't have to. But I guess instead of asking you a personal question about that, is let's see, let me figure out how to the best say it. Over the last couple of years, do you feel that there has been less of a respectful treatment of judges and people in the judicial system than there used to be?
Absolutely. And I think a lot of that comes, as many things have, from the pandemic. I really think we sort of lost touch on how to deal with each other. And the courts kind of came under attack, especially when we reopened up. And all of the issues that may have been a result of the pandemic, whether it be a debt you had that you didn't have before, housing issue or some type of criminal activity, um, has sort of forced people into the court system in a certain sense. Judges have been called upon to make the decision, but I also think that people don't like the decisions that judges are making, can't understand why the judges are making the decision, and feel it's within their right to then sort of threaten the court or to do those kinds of things. I've had colleagues with me down by me that have been, threatened with some type of physical harm. Certainly, my security, as well as those of my colleagues here, uh, has been increased in recent times, and I think it's because people. I think there is a loss of respect for what judges do, what we're called upon to do, and a loss of respect for the decisions that we make. Um, and people not wanting to go through the process. If I make a decision, there is a court waiting to hear your appeal if you believe I was wrong. But people want to try to shortcut that. They want to try to say the judge shouldn't have made this decision, or because you made this decision, you're now unqualified to sit as a judge. All of those things. Much of that flowing from, quite honestly, our national discord, which I think is, in regard to judges, is just inappropriate. I mean, our Chief Justice of our Supreme Court has said it, and any judge that you talk to will tell you, the judges are doing their best to follow the law. You may not like the law, then get the law changed. You may not like the decision, you appeal it. There are always ways around that other than trying to threaten the person that's doing their best to try to, adjudicate a case. So,
Which is also a crime. So,
yes.
there's that.
And that's the other thing that people don't realize is when you start threatening public officials and not following the rules on how to you interact with a public official, but try to threaten them to influence them to do certain things, that typically is going to be a crime.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I mean, personally, when I think back, the whole defund the police, all that stuff, I feel like it started this just, I don't know, just let's just tear it all down. But, I've lived in neighborhoods where I was very thankful there was a police force very close by because it was dangerous, and I was very, very, very thankful to have them there. And all of you, I am thankful we have the justice system that we had. And I think you're right. If you don't like it, change the law.
That's right. And I also, I think also Americans, sometimes we're not grateful in certain respects for what we have. I've studied our legal systems all over the world, had judges from other countries visit here with us, and, from Japan, from parts in Africa, from some Slavic nations, which used to be part of the Soviet Union. They come here, they've looked at our system, and they say our system is the best that they've ever seen. And I think that that's true. I think Americans take it for granted because it's what we have. But I don't think that there's a better system in the world than ours.
No, and there's a lot I certainly wouldn't ever want to find myself in. So,
Exactly. Exactly. So,
all right. So, how do you, just changing a little bit, measure
mhm.
success as a judge?
Measure success.
Measure success in whatever.
Um, I don't know. Well, that's sort of it depends on what particularly I'm looking at. If I'm looking individually at a case, um, I think success is getting it right. Whether people are mad at you, whether they're not, the success is really getting it right, doing your best, and trying to make sure that you get it right. Sometimes you only sort of have that validation when the case may go up on appeal and then come back and say, yeah, judge was absolutely right. Other times you know, and sometimes counsel, even though they may be on the losing end, say, judge, you made the right call on it. Um, that's a success. I think overall, you have to apologize about the lights, but
It's okay.
overall, being a judge, I think for me, success is having people respect what I've done. That would be the ultimate success for me. You don't have to like me. You don't have to like every decision that I made. But if you can respect and appreciate what I've done, then I've been successful.
I love that. I feel like that's a life thing too, right? At the end of the
It
day,
is.
if
It
other
is.
people can respect what you've done and appreciate why you've done what you've done the way you did, yeah, I like that.
Absolutely. And I think that's really what it is. I mean, I've dedicated 20 plus years of my life to this, and it's important for me that people appreciate what I've done. So,
Well, I can tell you that there are a lot of people that do, and I keep hearing feedback from them all the time. So that's really good. If you could send one message to every person in America about the justice system, what would it be? What would you tell? What would you tell people?
um,
These are different questions.
yeah, I would probably tell them to not sort of judge our system, so to speak, no pun intended, but to not judge our system based upon what you hear from somebody else. I think everyone should go down to a court where they have the time and watch what happens and realize that as you're watching it, even that you're only seeing part of what's really occurring, but actually get down there and just begin to appreciate what really our courts are about, and not let people either on a national level or state level or wherever some politicians say, well, this is what our courts do and it's a bad thing and blah 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 blah. Get down there. That's why anybody that comes into my court, we welcome in. I want them to see it. I think that transparency is good because, when our courts aren't seen, what tends to happen is people keep thinking that it's this room, everybody, 100 people walk in and only 50 walk out because the others have been locked up. The reality is that's not what happens. I can always find one case where I may not have liked the result. But if you look at the whole picture overall, I think that you'll see that we have a great justice system in this country. And I do believe in the world second to none. And so, but you have to be able to experience it. So that's what I would tell everybody. Go find to your local courts and just sit there and do it. And if you have the opportunity to sit through a case and before the judge gives their decision, think about what decision you might make and why. And realize you may not be a lawyer, may not understand all the nuances, but just think about that. And also realize after you listen to everybody, making those decisions is not easy. Sometimes it's a very hard call. So,
Yeah. And sometimes I do that, and I'll think, oh, it was totally different than what I thought it was, because I didn't understand the nuance of the law, which I think that's another thing people get hung up on. But you don't. You think you do, but you don't. There was another judge, and there was a parent of an adult in there trying to be the lawyer, and the judge
Mhm.
said, "Look, there's this book right here. This is like our Bible, except that every line here refers to another book in the library. And unless you've read all of them in law school, you just have to let the lawyer do their job."
Absolutely. You have to let the lawyer do their job, and most lawyers, and here in Washtenaw County, we are so privileged because I think we have a great um, we have great lawyers who come in, and they understand what needs to be done. They understand the law. But they also take into account that you can have the law. The law is what the law is. Things get complicated when you add human beings. And so it's having those lawyers be able to figure out I'm dealing with a human being here. I'm dealing with all those feelings, those emotions, all of those things that come along with being a human being. And how does that tie into the law and our interpretation of the law? So,
And along that line, how important is it for the defendant to stay quiet and let their lawyer speak?
um, my personal opinion is I think they need to let the lawyer talk. I have yet to see, and there may be one or two, where a defendant says something that hasn't turned out bad. um, or, or was neutral, but it was what their lawyer was getting around to, but may have been saying it in a different way. Most of the time, um, when defendants start talking, things just don't go well because they're going to say something that may lead to another question that they may or may not have an answer to, or if they do have an answer, that's not a good answer to have. And it usually ends up going badly. I think the important thing for defendants, if they really want something said, is to really talk to their attorney and let their attorney filter that and say what needs to be said to the court. I think defendants sometimes say too much when they start talking for themselves.
No, I agree. And I never understood it before. I never really understood. Well, why don't you just let people say what they want to say? But yeah, I think that's because it opens the door to more questions and the whole
Oh,
questioning thing. Okay, can you explain that? Because it took me a long time to understand it. I will not even try to explain to people. Why is it that when someone's on the stand, people can only ask them questions and they can't just talk and tell a whole story?
even in terms of a person? Well, mainly because we don't, except with limited circumstances, allow someone sort of to narrate a story. There are limited circumstances where that can happen. But our system is built on the notion of question and answer. So someone asks a question and they're trying to get a specific piece of information from that person. You don't let somebody go on because then they're going to start talking. For example, they may say, well, the reason I said this is because Jimmy told me what Susie said. And so then you get into hearsay. You get into stuff that really can't be entered into evidence because it may be unreliable. Or they're saying things that for what other reasons may be inadmissible. So we do it based upon sort of this question and answer. The important thing, I think, and when I was teaching, the one thing that my students used to remark about, and I used to tell them, and we give this in our jury instructions to juries, the only piece of evidence is the answer to the question. It's not the question. The question is only there to give context to the answer that you get. And so that is so critical for people to really understand. Lawyers are trained to ask questions in certain ways because I want you thinking about maybe something else that I can't get in another way or that it may exist for whatever reason. But it's really important to understand that it's only the answer. And so our system is based upon this question and answer. Now, if I have somebody that may have some disability in some way, or sometimes even with a language barrier, you may allow them to do a bit of narration in terms of trying to get the information out. For me, in my career, have found that useful. For example, where I have someone who speaks a different language, that I allow them to narrate. Now, the reason for that is some of the languages don't translate word for word. They translate based upon conceptions, and so a whole thing has to come out to sort of get this picture of what somebody is trying to say. And so you have to, I found it useful. I guess you don't have to do it, but I found it useful to allow narration in that way. So,
Well, that makes a lot of sense. And that's good, because then they can get their clear point across instead of.
exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Because,
And
yes,
that's the important thing. We're really, a lot of people think the court system is there to trip people up or to do whatever. And sometimes that happens, but the reality is, especially when you're in a trial, you're doing something, you're really there for the search for the truth and to really get the right answer. That's our goal anyway.
I love that. That's your mic drop right there. To get the right answer, right? That's our goal. Like, that's it.
That's
That
it.
is. So, have you ever had a case, and obviously I'm not asking you for the case, because where the person is, like, you feel like but it all, I don't know, but it didn't come out that way in the end, where you feel like that person is really guilty or really innocent, but it didn't go, maybe the jury didn't go that way or whatever. And I don't know, because I always
I
wonder about that.
I have never. Well, I'm trying to think. I've never had a jury that I disagreed with the jury's decision. I understood how the jury got there. But it's kind of one of those things where there are cases, and as sitting there as a judge, I might find a particular way on something. That doesn't mean that finding the other way is absolutely wrong. And I might have a feeling about whether or not somebody is guilty, or somebody didn't do it. Um, but the grand reality is, I don't know. I can only go based upon what is presented, and then kind of put it through whatever analysis I'm going to put it through, much like a jury does. You go through it, and this is what happens. You can have different results from the same set of facts. And there are many times I can't say that either one is right or wrong. I might have come out differently, but I can see where a side did come out the way that it did. Um, so, I mean, that's probably the best way. It sounds like a convoluted answer, but it sounds like the best way of doing it, because I don't know whether or not I may have a gut feeling. I may, based upon my experience, feel that's a little bit shaky or whatever, but I'm looking at it through my lenses. And sometimes when a jury's looking at it through theirs, they see something different. Something is in them triggered, which leads them maybe to an opposite conclusion. But that doesn't mean that their conclusion I necessarily disagreed with. So,
That's an incredible answer. Okay. Yeah. Because unless you were right there, you don't absolutely know.
you don't know, and you also have to realize even people that are there um, see and hear things differently, and they begin to process it differently. So you can have two people that were there at that same thing, and they are saying different things. And it really doesn't mean that one of them is lying. They're just seeing it differently.
Oh my gosh, my daughter and I were looking for something, just a little thing, and I remember telling her to put it away in her room so that we would have it later. She remembers me saying I would take it and put it away so that we would have it later. Very clearly, both remembered, and I said we would make horrible witnesses. We have clear memories of the same incident, and it's absolutely the opposite. So,
But really, we're human beings and we process things differently. I mean, two people can be looking at the same thing, and it's kind of one of those things when I'm hearing a bench trial, and I'll have two people who don't have a dog in the fight at all. They're not there for either side, and they both say they watched it, both say they saw it, maybe feet from whatever incident occurred, and their stories just don't match. But they're not trying to lie to anybody. That's what they saw. That's what they remembered. That's how they're relating it. So
so fascinating. It's human behavior. I don't know. You have the ultimate seat to watch human behavior in action.
yes, and and that's what in a lot of ways makes the job fun. The humans make the job fun, also challenging, but they make the job fun.
Yeah. Well, speaking of humans, what would you like your legacy to be? Not for two is a two-parter. One is on the bench, and then the other one is not.
Um, I think for being on the bench that in the end, I'd like people to say that he was a good lawyer. He was kind. He was patient. And moreover, that I was fair. Um, if people say those things about me when it's all said and done, then I'm good. Um, in life, I guess it would be that he was a good man and an even better father. And if they say that about me, I'm good.
I had a feeling that was the father. Yeah, of course. That's the best thing, right? That is the best. That is, really is the best. I mean, I don't know. I'm not a father, but as a parent, yes.
Yes, as a parent, and that's what my kids think of me and how they turn out based upon what they see of me. I whatever little lesson I put into their lives or the little nugget that they hang on to get them through life. That's what's important.
Yeah. I love the way you think. I think you're a great example of a good judge, and who is fair, and so people want to know what are the thought processes and what are you thinking when different things happen, and I think you've given everyone a really good example of letting people in, a little peek inside, and yeah, that's incredible. So I appreciate
Well,
that.
I appreciate the opportunity to be able to do that.